This video is brought to you in part by the patrons of the Lazy Eyebrow, and from the comments and watch time from viewers like you. Thank you! Why, hello YouTube, greetings from the Lazy Eyebrow to another diet review. This is the review for Studio Series Release 80, kinda can't believe it's been that many, Brawn. An insanely surprising release, or at least it is for me. For a character that had a total of 237 frames,
escape pods. Stand if we hope to survive. We must find refuge.
in a nearly 2-hour movie that got its own toy? That's awesome! I mean, it only took 4 years, but hey, we take what we can get, right? I mean, I certainly will, because this means that I finally get to talk about Brawn! So this is Brawn in his ult mode, and for what it's aiming to accomplish, it's very much hitting its mark. The Bumblebee movie's opening scene featured quite a lot of characters that looked exactly like how many of us were expecting a movie version of G1 characters to look, and Brawn here is no exception. In the microchange subline, Brawn is a Churro-Q-style Land Rover Defender Mark II, or what some people think is a Toyota Land Cruiser of the same era. And no judgment to those people, they're allowed to be wrong. This vehicle mode has the same sort of feel as both of those vehicles though. It's this dense, chunky, squat, industrial strength lump that looks like it's built for manual labor and could tank a hit or two and still have the strength to hurl giant boulders at you, which is very on point for Brawn. What strikes me as interesting though is that for the most part, Brawn releases, official or otherwise, have always been a green vehicle with all the yellow exploding out once it's transformed. And this release doesn't even bother trying to do that. Instead, the colors we're used to seeing in robot mode have made themselves even more evident in this vehicle mode, with this being a predominantly corn yellow alien truck thing with pea green accents. Which, as much as I'd prefer the colors to be a little more saturated, it is sort of an interesting direction to take the vehicle, and I don't actually mind the change of pace for once. But as for the vehicle itself, I kinda dig it. It's alien, so it's not gonna look like an Earth vehicle, but it still looks like a design that makes sense within their world. Like every bit of it is crafted in a way that suits the character of Brawn, a small but extremely powerful and humble Autobot. And I honestly can't think of a better way to translate that into a movie design. That being said though, it's certainly not perfect. Once you stop looking at this from just the side and take a gander from the top, your eyes are immediately drawn to this big gaping hole up top. And maybe it's supposed to be like that, like what if Brawn was like an ore hauler or something and this was his hopper? I wouldn't mind that so much if that was the case, as again, having him lug stuff around would be kind of on point for his character and the strength and all that. What I do take issue with though is inside that big gaping hole is his head, just chilling out there, doing pretty much nothing. Like, we frequently complain about visible head syndrome when we flip up a car, and yet this is very clearly the head visible during vehicle mode from a plainly seen angle. I find that slightly disappointing. Maybe you could explain that away as being the rotor that grinds down the ore to find particulate matter or something, but that headcanon aside, it's not really a great design choice. Anyway, that nitpick aside, I really like how this turned out, and for that matter, how most of the Bumblebee movie's Cybertronian designs are turning out. I picked up the Wheeljack on a whim, and I think both have been great so far. It feels closer to recognizable character that is alien than, say, what Siege ended up pulling off. Not saying Siege is bad or anything, I ended up getting most of them, but like, here's 2 Siege figures next to their Earth facelifts. And aside from minor tweaks here and there, you're still essentially looking at the same figure, the same vehicle, the same everything. This isn't a knock towards Siege per se, as that is what the intention was the whole time, and that does it well. And the movie was going for a different aesthetic entirely, but the Bumblebee movie Cybertronian designs go way further into looking like alien vehicles, and I personally am all for it. Like, Brawn especially looks like the lost model from the 2010 video game, and if it can fit that well into an aesthetic that was established that took place entirely on Cybertron, then I'd say this new line is doing something right. As for accessories, Brawn comes with 2. A blaster, which I'll talk more about later, and a drill attachment. The rifle has a hole in the bottom of the barrel that has been designed to interface with a peg on the top of the vehicle for onboard weapon integration. It's kinda dumb in my eyes, but it's not without precedent even within the movie. As for the drill, a port can flip out on the front to give a spot for the drill to front mount, which I gotta admit I was not expecting to see on something like this. This is just straight up a G1 cartoon reference from the episode The Ultimate Doom Part 1. Why is this here? Did it ever show up in the movie? Will it ever show up again in the future? Who knows? But the unnecessary inclusion here is awesome, and I'm quite happy with its appearance here. Unfortunately, it doesn't actually spin so much as it rotates within the peg, so if you want to animate that, it doesn't quite look the greatest, but hey, it's possible. As for size comparison, here's Off-Road Bumblebee, Studio Series Wheeljack, Studio Series Optimus, and Titans Return Brawn. Studio Series Dropkick and Shatter, Siege Mirage, Sideswipe, Prowl, and Ironhide, and finally their Earthrise or Kingdom overhauls. So anyway, that was Studio Series Brawn in his vehicle mode. It bears repeating, I love this thing. It's alien so it doesn't look like any particular vehicle, and that's great for what this is trying to do. At the same time though, it's not unrecognizable. The qualities that make up Brawn, that he's short and small but dense, durable, strong, and powerful, are totally embodied in this design, and for an alien Brawn vehicle mode, I don't think they could have nailed this any better than they actually have.
The Transformers will return after these messages.
This episode of Lazy Eyebrow is sponsored by Ridge Wallets. And, well, yes, by law, I do have to disclose that this is a sponsored segment. This is actually a product I was looking into getting in the first place, and therefore one I highly recommend. Like, for reference, this is my bulky old wallet that has spots for 7 different cards and a pouch for money, and then compare that to the Ridge wallet that I've been using for about a month now. And even though it holds up to 12 cards, it still takes up 51.6% less space in my pocket than the wallet with nothing in it. And more pocket room is just the beginning of its features. Its durable design means that you won't be cracking up your credit cards like I was constantly having the issue with my old wallet, so that you can keep your cards physically safe. And the RFID lined walls help keep your cards digitally safe. In fact, Ridge is so confident in their product that not only are they going to give you a lifetime warranty on the wallet, they're also going to give you 45 days to test drive the wallet to see if you like it. And if you don't, no problem. Send it right back to get yourself a full refund. So check the link in the description below or the pinned comment where you can order your own in a choice of 30 different colors and finishes. This particular one is the carbon fiber one. And use code LAZYEYEBROW to get 15% off your next purchase. Thanks again to Ridge for sponsoring this video.
We now return to the Transformers.
So then, on to transformation. We start on the underside by removing the legs from the front of the vehicle. The fact that they've used the pegs of the wheels as extra peg slots is such a galaxy brain move. Like, I whine continuously about how cheap visible pegs on wheels are so ugly looking, and they've taken that and used it to their advantage in ways that I've only seen garage modders with printers use to attach their hubcaps to. Like, it caught me way off guard when I noticed that, and as such thought it was totally worth mentioning here. Anyway, after that, you rotate the legs all the way back, flip up the feet, and then rotate the legs all the way around until the knees peg in, and then rotate them up. I can't remember ever seeing this sort of leg transformation set up before, and I gotta admit, it's also kinda cool. Pull the arms out on their place in the cockpit and rotate them down. Push the head up into his neck hole until it clips in. Rotate in the front wheels and then rotate the back down until it pegs in. Finally, rotate the waist 180 and you're done. So here's Brawn in his robot mode, and yeah, that's Brawn. Much like the vehicle embodiment, this robot encapsulates pretty much everything about a Brawn's design. He's a small guy, but he's got a ton of armor on him, and looks like a guy you would not want to get a sock to the jaw from. Interestingly enough, though, a lot of that yellow that made up the vehicle mode has compressed itself into pretty much just the torso, and the limbs make up the rest of the green. So what was once mostly yellow is now mostly green with that iconic yellow torso. I also love how, and this is more of an opinion on the movie design versus the toy, because I feel it very well captures what was on screen, but I love this whole chunky collar armor, almost like it's referencing the way the toy in the cartoon was this silver head against a big yellow brick. And here, instead of a massive yellow thing jutting up out of his back, they incorporated that into the design and made it make sense. I totally love how they pulled that off. Almost feels like an NSX design in the way it all just curves up naturally and feels like one cohesive design. Like, this is Brawn. There is no mistaking who this is unless you didn't know who Brawn was in the first place, and I, for one, am loving that Brawn is finally getting some time in the spotlight. Like, he's even got this iconic dome of a head with the face cut out looking a little more Centurion than usual, but the design is still slightly referential towards the G1 look, and that's kinda neat. The face doesn't really do it for me, though. It's screen accurate, and all the movie characters tend to have this sort of look to them, but I feel this one more so just feels like a bunch of random parts with eyes underneath a Juggernaut helmet, and getting light in there is such a chore. Beyond that, though, I love all the mechanical detail they picked out in gunmetal, really making this feel like a living machine with functioning parts underneath the star-faded yellow armor, or the hydraulic lines they've molded into the shoulders or the bottom of the legs. The heft of the forearms is awesome, and again, on point for Brawn. The hips feature some really cool riveted detail among more of the mechanical molding, all of which is surrounded by more green armor plating, which brings us all the way down to the industrial strength CSA approved steel-toed feet that Brawn rests upon. And for the cherry on top, we have a very clean back of the figure. It all feels so tidy, and not at all like anything was sacrificed back here for the sake of the front of the robot. It's just such a nice looking robot the whole way around. His accessories, though, make a little less sense here, so first off, you get the drill. It doesn't hold much value here in robot mode, but if you wanted to store it, the peg that held the gun mode for the vehicle is still accessible, so the drill could store there, and he can hold it if that's your fancy too. Or finally, it can store on the gun using the same peg and 3mm port option. There's options basically is what I'm trying to get at, none of which do it for me. I'm just happy it came along for the vehicle mode. Now as for the blaster, I'm not faulting it for looking like it does, as any sort of knock to it is its screen accuracy, because it very much is the blaster that Brawn had in his hands during the 26 frames where he yelled. But I have two questions. One, why is this more or less the same blaster that came with Wheeljack, but just a little bit bigger and blast effect compatible? Are these standard issue rifles that are assigned to the movieverse Cybertronians? And more importantly, here's my second question. Why do they all look like Sideswipe's flare gun? I mean, that's not exactly a bad thing, I guess, as the flare gun is a pretty classic design. I just feel it odd. Maybe they only designed one rifle in a rush and the animators gave it to everyone? I don't really know. I just think it's weird that everybody has Sideswipe's gun. Anyway, the physical representation of this blaster is pretty cool. Like I said, it's blast effect compatible, and it does look like it did on screen. You can't get much better than that for a toy design. Articulation on this walking turtle fella includes a head on a post for left and right movement, but only in a very limited range, which is fine when you think about it because it's not like he'd be able to see over much of his hunch anyway. Shoulders are on a ball joint with a cutout for limited outward movement. Technically there's a bicep swivel, but it's so limited that it may as well have not been included. Arms are double jointed, so that's pretty cool, and the wrist swivels. Waist swivels 360 degrees and has a little bit of backwards ab crunch, or a forwards one if you angle the crotch piece right. Legs go a little bit backward and all the way forward. Theoretically, they should also be able to go all the way out, but the wheels collide with the torso, making for a moderate A stance at the maximum. Pivot at the knee, which is what I wish was possible at the elbow, 115-degree knee bend, toes that can point down, but not up sadly, as cool as that would be, and finally an ankle tilt. All in all, not a bad set of articulation points. I just wish the biceps could move like the thighs do is the only thing I wish it could do. As for size comparison, here's Studio Series Wheeljack, Off-Road Bumblebee, which is more or less the Cybertronian Bumblebee, Studio Series 38 Marmon Prime, Jet Shatter, Car Dropkick, Generations War for Cybertron Optimus and Megatron, Siege Sideswipe, Siege Mirage, Select Smokescreen, and Siege Ratchet, and finally their Earth counterparts. So that was the Studio Series 80 Brawn. I don't know how to make myself any clearer, friends. Brawn is awesome. They've made a Brawn toy at the deluxe price point that feels exactly like he ought to. He's short and in general small, and yet he feels so burly, dense, heavily armored, and strong. For a toy in a universe that usually tends to take a marketable name and do whatever it wants with it, I genuinely feel like they got who Brawn is on design alone, which could be said for a lot of this movie's designs, fair point, but the fact they got Brawn too is just doing it for me. I can't even begin to describe. This is a Cybertronian take on a G1 Brawn that happens to be in the Movieverse line. Like, this absolutely fits right in alongside the likes of Huffer, Warpath, Bumblebee, and Cliffjumper as that small but quality deluxe G1 character, just with the caveat that this is the Cybertronian version. Maybe this will spark interest in general for Hasbro to visit Brawn in Legacy, or whatever comes after Legacy, because I would totally kill for an Earth version of Brawn to be announced that has this level of quality poured into it, and who knows, maybe even get a Gears retool out of it or something, because like I keep saying, this thing feels like Brawn, and I love it to death for that. This has been the Lazy Eyebrow.